Throughout Berserk's story, there were 3 instances where Godo interacted with Guts in a significant way. The first was in the chapter, Sparks from the Sword Tip, which I covered in my previous video. The second were in the chapters right after the eclipse, when Guts received the dragonslayer from Godo. While this second interaction is indeed very significant, as it marks the start of Guts' black swordsman persona, it wasn't necessarily Godo who drove this change. It was more like he assisted it. However, the same cannot be said for the final participation Godo had towards the story. The third and last time they interacted were in the early parts of the Conviction arc, when Guts returned to the trio to check up on Casca. This was not just one of the most significant and important interactions the two shared, but it is one of the most pivotal moments in the whole story. I'm not going to talk too much about the actual conversation between Guts and Godo, which was in the chapter, Cracks in the Blade, because other people have already made great videos on it. But just as a short summary, Godo pretty much gives Guts a kick in the pants, and tells him that he abandoned the only thing he couldn't replace, Casca, and that he had no reason to be angry towards Rickert, who willingly chose to stay and protect those who were important to him. He compares Guts' mental and physical state to the sword, with multiple cracks in it. In this video, I will be focusing on the following chapter after Cracks in the Blade, titled A Feeble Flame, and the following chapters after it, since these are the chapters where Guts actually evaluates and reflects on what Godo warned him about, which all leads to a complete change in the trajectory of Guts' journey. The chapter opens up with a scene where the group goes to the hilltop where the eclipse took place. Rickert had placed some swords as a grave in memory of his fallen comrades. Guts notes that Rickert had truly changed. He says, he found a new way to live, through that vigorous strength of his. A few pages later, when the group enter the Elfin Cave, Guts apologizes to Rickert. To me this is huge. How many more instances are there where Guts admitted to someone else that he was wrong? In these scenes, Guts realized that unlike him, without falling into pure rage and feeling vengeful, Rickert had come to terms and accepted the fact that the ban of the Hawk was gone. What I find particularly interesting is the way Guts consciously recognized how Rickert had grown stronger. Throughout the Golden Age arc, Rickert was always portrayed as being the weakest member of the central group in the band. He was constantly picked on and ridiculed, especially by Caucus, and Guts fully knew this as well. However, in this scene, we see that he isn't weak anymore, he is strong. As mentioned earlier, Guts admitted that Rickert had a vigorous strength in him. Rickert's strength is not the same type of physical brute strength that Guts carries, or the type of influential strength Griffith has. In contrast, it is the type of vigorous strength where he can withstand his inner demons, which would otherwise crush a normal person. We even saw instances where Guts and Griffith couldn't accept certain things which happened to them. With Guts, it was the eclipse, and with Griffith, it was with Guts leaving the band. In both of these scenarios, the two couldn't accept their inner demons like Rickert had done here. While Rickert might not be as powerful as these two, in a different, separate way, he is indeed stronger than Guts and Griffith. Later on in the chapter, Guts is left alone in the cave to rest for the night. This is where the real meat of this mini arc takes place. He tells himself that even though he is in a safe environment, he feels restless. After all, he had been killing the evil spirits going after him every single night, and he is not used to sleeping without his sword anymore. However, there is another reason he cannot sleep. Godo's verbal slap still occupies his mind. He repeats the words in his head. He has a momentary flashback of the eclipse. Guts tells himself, I didn't run away. I can't run not from the last thing seared into my right eye. He doesn't want to believe Godo. He does not want to admit that he was telling the exact truth. This is when the Beast of Darkness appears. The Beast of Darkness represents this resentful, raging side of Guts. He had almost been a slave to the side of him for the last 2 years. He realizes that if he keeps telling himself that he had indeed made the right decision. He will be completely consumed by the darkness. That if he keeps falling into this rage, he will fall right into Godo's words about fear and war. In an effort to not let the beast engulf him, Guts finally concedes that what Godo said might be right. He did in fact abandon Casca. He says, "I've got no right talking about revenge for my comrades when I abandoned Casca, abandoned the Band of the Hawk itself." Guts has another flashback, but this time it shows the band members, and what they told him when he had returned from his year-long journey. The particularly brilliant part of this scene is that the three members, Caucus, Judo and Casca, all have different contrasting views on Guts abandoning or leaving the group. Caucus, in his typical pessimistic tone, pretty much says that Guts had betrayed the band and that he wasn't there when things were at their worst. When he remembers about Judo, we see how, unlike Caucus, Judo respected Guts' decision. He is told that he had already separated himself, that he should take Casca with him. And finally, when he remembers about Casca, she tells him that he has his own battles to fight, and that he has to go, even if it's alone. She pretty much undermines what Judo had told Guts earlier about taking her with him. He tells himself, "That's right. Long ago, I started this war myself." It was Guts' decision to leave the band which caused Griffith and the whole band's downfall, and he willingly chose to wage the war on Apostles and to pursue Griffith and the God Hand. No one forced him to do it. He remembers about the bonfire of dreams. But still, what's burning me ain't just this black flame. The campfire from those days still burns in my chest. The black flame, which is the side of Guts with the beast of darkness, hasn't taken full control over him yet. Although it may be small, another fire burns within him. This other fire is Casca. Casca's presence was the only thing which sustained him from being a complete slave to his black flame. He realizes he did it again. Just like earlier on in the Golden Age arc, he abandoned the most important things to him without even noticing it. As he says in his own words, without even knowing, without even realizing, I'd thrown it from the palm of my hand. But the feeble flame had not blown out yet. It's not too late. The night ends and the sun's ray beams through the opening of the cave. Guts makes a crucial decision which completely changes the trajectory of his journey. I'll never lose her again. Wait, isn't this video titled How Godo Changed Guts again? Why does Godo never appear? This isn't even about him anymore. What's the deal with that? Okay. In the next chapter, To Holy Ground Part 1, Godo, who had been bedridden for a long time, willingly comes downstairs. To this, Rickert is extremely surprised, and even tells him that what he is doing is absurd, but Godo dismisses him. He says, "Erika's your responsibility." He goes on to explain that she isn't his real daughter, that she's an orphan who lost her family in the war. Godo says a very crucial line. In regards to looking after Erika, Godo states, "It let me, who'd known nothing but steel since the day I was born, feel pretty human." But then, sure enough, when it's time to die, it's good to fall forward alone. A good sword, even if it rusts and dulls, has good steel that never rusts left over in the wick. That steel's the ultimate steel. Even if it cracks, if you return it to the fire, it's sure to be reborn. Tell this to that fool. Don't turn out like me. As I said in my previous video, Godo was someone who, like Guts, had a tool in his hand before he could remember anything. Using that tool, he practiced his trade his whole entire life, to the point he didn't even know if he liked it or not. He simply continued to do it, since it was the only thing there was for him. Guts took this lesson in a positive, insightful way, but in this scene here, Godo came to regret and remorse this type of thinking. Sure, He enjoyed the sparks, and he didn't dislike doing it, but in this scene, he realized that he had been consumed by the sparks far too much, to the point that he almost forgot what was important to him. Only after raising Rickert did Godo feel pretty human. Only after caring and being loved back by another human being did Godo understand what was central to being human. And just like how Guts had seen himself through Godo, Godo saw shades of himself in Guts. But here, he doesn't want Guts to end up like him. He doesn't want him to be consumed by the sparks, to the point he forgets what's truly important to him. Guts holds the freshly forged dragonslayer while wearing his new armor. After receiving some information about Casca's potential whereabouts, just before he is about to leave, he tells the dying blacksmith what ultimately becomes his final words to him. "Godo, you're a good blacksmith. I'll count on you again once I come back." To this, Godo replies, "So you say, worthless fool." Off he goes without even a look back. That's how it is with that fool. This might be our final parting, but you haven't even got time to stop and acknowledge it. Well, it's a lot better than getting all gloomy. He turns and starts running towards something one way, without noticing some other thing, and nicks himself. It really is beyond our control. Beyond our control, living and dying. And thus, we see the last panel of Godo while he is still alive. One extremely important analogy, which I think is largely overlooked by most readers, is that Godo wasn't just a blacksmith who forged and sharpened Guts' sword. He resharpened and forged Guts himself. In two of the instances the pair interacted, Guts had some personal issues within him, and both times, Godo gave him an inspiring, unexpected lesson, which changed the trajectory of his journey in a massive way. To rephrase my earlier statement, Godo didn't just resharpen Guts, he resharpened the most important aspect of his character, his will. This is exactly why, in a narrative sense, Godo is a blacksmith who forges and sharpens swords.